In this video, I want to show you how I recreated the drum sound for the Taylor Swift song, The Fate of Ophelia. And I've done it using all stock Logic sounds and stock Logic plugins. So let's take a listen to the final drum mix, and then I will walk you through how we got here. Here's what the drum sounded like completely unprocessed. So the kick still sounds okay, but the snare's got a lot of work to be done on it to achieve the sound that's in the Taylor Swift song. So the first thing I'm doing is drum selection. For this particular song, I've chosen just the first one on the list here, the Birch Punch kick, because the kick drum in this song isn't super subby and low. It's more of this kind of punchy sound up around 100 hertz, 80 to 100 hertz. And it's kind of like the drums are like very minimal, I would say, very tight and minimal in this song. So this is just a very not in your face kick, just very soft and subtle. So I've chosen that one. For the snare drum, I've chosen the modern Babinga snare. And the reason I'm choosing this one is mainly for the high end characteristics. So the sound of the snare wires on the snare just match as closely as I could find out of all these snares to what the original drum sound like in the Taylor Swift song. And it was a bit quiet, so I just turned up the gain a little bit. You can see that for both the kick and the snare, I'm not sending any signal to the overheads or room mic. So it's only the hi-hats that are going to those mics. The reason for that is just that these are just really, really tight, dry sounding drums. So we don't really want any room signal or even signal in the overheads for that matter. I'm just using the close mics. So moving on to the processing on each of the individual channels. I've got my overheads here. And actually let's start with the kick drums. So like with my other mixes, I'm busing the kick in and the kick out mics together. So both of these are routed to output bus 2, and they're showing up here, bus 2. And so on the kick in mic, I'm doing no processing at all. But on the kick out mic, I've just got this EQ bringing out a lot of the muddy low mids. So that sounds like this. Yeah, it just makes it deeper sounding, less cloudy. And then on the overall kicks bus, first thing I'm doing is some compression. So this is just to help the kick drum have a little bit more punch. So slow attack, fast release, or actually kind of slow release here, medium to slow release, 660 milliseconds with the 1176 compressor. So let's hear what this sounds like. Yeah, it just makes it a tiny bit punchy sounding, but I don't want to compress it too hard because otherwise it'll sound small and kind of like everything's getting sucked in. So I want to make sure I'm just doing light compression on my individual kicks. So the next thing I've got going on is an EQ here, and I'm just adding a little bit of punch around 70 hertz, 2.8 dB, taking out some of the low mids here, and then just a high shelf around 5.5K. Here's what this sounds like. Just brightening up the kick a little bit and making it sound a little bit cleaner. And then finally another EQ move, just taking out some more low mids around 500 hertz here. So here's what this sounds like. And moving on to the snare drum. So the first thing I've got is an EQ, boosting some of the fundamental and just tucking in some of the low mids. Actually, this is a very big cut, almost 8 dB around 600 hertz here. So here's what this sounds like. And then we've got some distortion using this magnetic setting. It's like a tape setting on the Chroma Grow plugin. So here's what this sounds like. It's cool. It just helps the snare to sound more saturated and just a little bit more in your face sounding. And then we've got some compression here. I really wanted to shorten the tail of the snare essentially, and to kind of just make it this little pop that comes through, but not have a long tail. So I'm using this compressor with a pretty slow release time, slow attack, slow release, and a very high ratio here. So this is essentially allowing the initial transient of the snare to come through, but it's clamping down and compressing for the sustain of the note. So you'll hear when I engage this, the snare will become just a lot more focused sounding and a lot tighter sounding. So I'll start with this off and then I'll engage it. It's really cool. It's almost like, yeah, you've just put something like a wallet or something on the snare drum to just tighten up that ring. So it's really cool to be able to use compression to do that. And then the final thing is this tube EQ, this pulse EQ here. So looks like just boosting a little bit around 5K and just driving the output all the way up. So here's what this sounds like. Then we've got some additional processing on the snare top mic. I'm sending this to a couple of different buses. So the first one, bus 3 here, is this snare punch channel. And so let's see what's going on here. So this is just the classic VCA DBX style compressor. And so ratio almost all the way up, 30:1. And this is just going to be adding a bunch of punch to the snare. So I'll start with this channel muted, and then I'll bring it in and you can hear what it's adding to the snare signal. So it's subtle, but just helping the snare in context to pop out a little bit more, to punch through a little bit more. So that's what that's doing there. And then the second thing is the send to this reverb. So sending to bus 4, which shows up here. And this is just a reverb I've added almost subliminally to be able to have the snare have a little bit of space around it. I felt like I was hearing some reverb in the original song, so I just wanted to add this. So this is what this sounds like. You can hear it there, but in the context of the overall drum mix, it is very subtle. And then lastly, I'm sending to this stereo delay. So this is basically just a Haas effect type thing. 13 milliseconds delay on the left, 33 on the right, 100% wet. So this is just kind of spreading the snare out a little bit. So I still have the main signal down the middle, but then I'm just adding a little bit of width to the snare. So without it, it sounds like this. And then with it. So it just helps to make the snare a bit wider sounding, a bit fuller sounding. And then moving on, I've got the hi-hat mic. Looks like I'm doing a similar compression trick where I'm using a long release and a slow release, slow attack. And so this is really trying to push the hi-hat back and just make the accents stand out. So here's what this sounds like without it, and then I'll engage it. You can hear what it's doing. Yeah, so it's just softening up the hi-hat, just making it a little bit more delicate sounding, a bit tighter, and just pushing it back a little bit in the mix. And then that's all the processing I've got for this particular drum mix. Let's see, am I using the room or leak mics? Yeah, so I've got the room mic muted, but I am using this leak mic, not doing any processing, just setting a level. And that just helps to add a little bit of glue to the drums. It's got kind of the bleed from all of the drum pieces in there. We've also got the overheads channel here. So on this, I am swapping the left and right signal just to put the drums back into drummer's perspective, just to match what was in the original song. And it's just how I like to mix drums and hear drums where the hi-hat's on the left and the floor toms on the right. So that's what this is doing, just swapping the left and right signal. And then just some compression, similar thing to the hi-hat where I'm using a slow release time just to kind of push these back. Because I believe it's only the hi-hat that's coming through this channel. Let me just check. Yeah, so it's only the hi-hat that's coming through here. So that's what this compressor is here. So I'll engage this and you can hear what it's doing. Cool, so moving on to the overall drum bus now. The first thing I've got is this compressor, and I'm using the vintage Fate, this 1176 compressor here. So slow attack and medium-ish release, 150 millisecond release. Ratio is set to 2:1, so we can hear what this is adding. Yeah, it's cool, it's subtle, but it's just making the drums a little bit tighter sounding, a little bit punchier sounding. Next thing is this EQ, which is doing absolutely nothing. I don't know why that's still on there. Anyway, next thing is a distortion, this Chroma Glow, adding some distortion to the overall drum mix. So here's what this sounds like. And then I've got another Chroma Glow instance here, and this one is adding more distortion, but it's on this squeeze channel, which adds a lot of smack and punch, and it's really aggressive. So I've only got it set to 11%, and then I've only got the mix set to 9%. So I'm only blending a tiny little bit of it into the overall drum mix, just to add a little bit more body, a little bit more bite to the drums. So let's hear what this is doing. And then finally, I've just got this EQ move, boosting some subs around 2 dB at 40 Hertz and boosting some mid-range around 1.5K. So here's what this is doing. Cool, so that's the overall drum mix. And I hope that was helpful to see how you can use relatively minimal processing to be able to achieve this sound. And if you do have Logic and you want to download this preset, I will leave a link to it in the description, and you'll be able to install this, and then you'll be able to start mixing with this preset that I've created here. So yeah, I hope that's helpful, and thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video.